Hello and welcome to the Point. I'm Shashi Tharoor and my guest this evening is Anjolie Ela Menon, one of India's greatest living painters, and I wouldn't have said one off were it not for the fact that she's also my aunt. Anjolie, my welcome to the Point.
Thank you very much, Shashi. And I like being your aunt.
Reverse nepotism here. That's why I didn't say greatest, but we all think you're right up there. It's wonderful to see you. And what's amazing is that you have actually managed to turn 81 without anyone noticing. And that's the reverse of when you first started exhibiting your artwork at the age of 18.
18, that's right.
Do you remember that first exhibition way back in, what was it, 1958?
Yes, I do. It was amazing because I was painting prolifically at the time. And
you'd just come out of school.
I just come out of school and I was in Miranda House. And Hussain Saab came over one day. I don't know what the circumstances were, but he saw all these paintings and he said, you must have an exhibition, and there were 51 paintings. So we lived in Lodi Estate at that time, 71 Lodi Estate, and Hussain designed a card which he had printed for me.
How nice.
And he came personally with bamboo poles and gunny bags and made a wonderful structure for the paintings to be hung in the garden.
The garden of Miranda House or the garden of your own house?
Of our house.
Okay.
And that was the first exhibition. And to that exhibition came Count Osterog, who was the French ambassador. I had wonderful reviews for that exhibition with Richard Bartholomew writing a great piece.
Saying that you're going to be counted amongst one of the greatest artists, and he was so right.
Well,
Richard Bartholomew in 1958 saw your talent.
Yeah, he did. You've done some homework.
Oh, of course. I always do my homework.
Okay. And then Count Osterog decided that I should go to France to study. And he engineered the whole thing. And I suddenly got a letter to say, you are being awarded a scholarship to go to the École des Beaux-Arts.
And the École des Beaux-Arts was simply the most prestigious institution in the painting world.
I have
You'd
to say,
also gotten admission, I understand, to the Slade School in London.
I did. But I rejected that for the École des Beaux-Arts. Because the excitement of going to France, I was rather foolhardy in a way, because I didn't speak a word of French. But there were 6 months left for my departure, so I joined a French class in Delhi, Alliance. And it's ironic that Alliance now occupies that building where I had my first exhibition.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, that is.
In Lodi Estate, of course.
Yes.
I've been there.
Yes.
They have a theatre there too.
Yeah, that's right.
That's extraordinary.
And anyway, so off I went to France. I have to say that scholarship was very meager. One was terribly poor on it. And there was no Indian maison in the Cité Universitaire at the time.
There is one now, yes.
There is one now. But I had to stay at the Maison des États-Unis, which was the American one. But they gave me a wonderful studio. And I got it because I was housed by the welcome committee in a horrid little hotel, which turned out, as it happened, though I didn't even know that the word existed, it turned out to be a lesbian hotel.
Oh, my word.
And I was being hit on.
By every neighbor.
So I fled from there and spent the rest of the time at the Maison des États-Unis. And joined the
Did the Americans realize you have this interesting American connection? You have an American grandmother.
I have an American grandmother.
Amazing story that your grandfather traveled to Harvard, was it, in the 1890s?
No, he was the first Indian at MIT.
MIT.
And he did a double degree of electrical engineering and civil engineering.
Right.
And his first job when he came back, he proposed to my grandmother, who promptly left her studies at Wellesley and started preparing her trousseau. And he went back 2 years later, having got a job. Now, he didn't go back. His father, Sir K.G. Gupta, traveled all the way to America to escort his son's bride-to-be back to India.
Oh, very nice.
It was not right for her to travel alone.
Oh, very nice.
And then his first job was the electrification of the Kashmir Valley.
Your grandfather's?
My grandfather's.
Look at
and
that.
they traveled in 14 tongas from Delhi to Srinagar with all their goods and chattels. And there they never left Srinagar for the next 3 or 4 years, including where my mother was born.
Right. And your mother was you were very close to her, and I gather she passed away when you were still just
We were
14,
very
was
young.
it?
15 I was, yeah. That
how
was
very
a terrible
sad.
tragedy.
Did she have any influence on your deciding to pick up painting? I know
No,
your father
in
wanted you to
fact-
become a doctor. That was a family
And
story.
my mother thought that I should go to Oxford and become a writer, because I used to write a lot in those days.
Yeah, that would have been an interesting thing too.
So,
Why
yeah.
not? You didn't want to.
well, I have written some odd things in my time. Mostly essays on art,
Okay.
nothing personal. But I am in the process of writing something a bit frivolous, which is a culinary journal. Because I also, besides
you are
painting,
fond of cooking,
I
aren't you?
do love to cook. And this
Having
is
sampled some of that myself, I can testify to the excellence of your
okay.
cooking. Wonderful.
But
And you're writing about it.
I'm writing about it with my grandmother's marvelous recipes, of my French aunt's wonderful food that she did in France, wonderful pâtés, and you're a vegetarian, so you won't even understand.
Alas.
But the Russian food, the years that we spent in Russia, so there's a lot there. And
Well, I should explain, of course, that you're the daughter of an army man,
yes,
the granddaughter of an engineer,
yeah.
and the wife of our principal nuclear submariner, if I remember right, but certainly a submarine admiral in the
Yes.
in the Indian Navy. So you've had a curiously interesting sort of military come technical background in the family.
Yes.
Did that influence you at all, or was it just something that obliged you to pack up your paintbrushes and go from place to place and you never thought about it?
Well, I had to learn. You won't believe that as a Navy wife, I changed house 30 times. So I had to learn, which a wonderful lesson that Hussain taught me, that just with a bag of paints and a couple of boards or canvases, you could paint anywhere. In fact, the years we were in the Soviet Union, I painted under a staircase, which the hotel allowed me to use. And
Under a staircase.
Under a staircase, in a little cupboard under the
And that was
staircase.
a fairly long stint, right? At least a year or two?
2 years.
2 years, yeah.
And I
Because
had an
again, he was there because of the submarine deal
yeah,
with the Russians.
and
at that time.
I had an exhibition there of these paintings that I painted. And of course, we had no help, and I had to tie my baby on my back while I painted, otherwise he'd put his fingers in the paint.
In the paint. Worse, he might then put them in his mouth, which would not be very good.
But the exhibition I had in Russia was very strange, because at the last minute they said, you may not send out invitations. But the day of the opening, there was a mile-long queue to get into the exhibition. It was just word of mouth.
Wonderful.
Because they had never seen an exhibition by anyone except a Russian.
Right.
And the Russian paintings at the time were all
Socialist realism.
Socialist realism. And my paintings were far from that, as you know. And but the sad thing that happened was that 7 days into the exhibition, they closed it down. The Russian authorities closed it down.
Were you anything subversive about your art?
Well, a young Komsomols worker came to talk to me on the opening day.
Right.
She was a very pretty young thing. And she said, why don't you paint the way that we Russians are being targeted? So I said, for the same reason that I don't paint why you people invaded Czechoslovakia, which had just done at the time. Promptly the next day. And the excuse they gave, oh, the hall is going
Needed.
to be up for renovation, which wasn't true at all.
Well, welcome
But
to their
the
system.
whole
anyway.
exhibition sold out.
I'm not surprised. But where did the Russians have the money from?
I don't know where they had the money, because they had nothing else to spend their money on.
Well,
And
that's
in
true,
those Soviet days,
yeah.
there was hardly any food available. There was the stores were absolutely empty. The only thing they had was toys. And they really kind of favored children, because the Deski Sat, or kindergarten, was well stocked with food and fruit at the time when there was no fruit available. And lots of lovely toys. Each child was given a toy of his own.
Wow.
They were wonderfully run, those kindergartens. So one of our kids were there, and the other little one was only 7 months old. So he was tied on my back while I painted.
Now, this is wonderful.
Yeah.
Actually, since we mentioned your American grandmother, I should mention to our audience that you actually represent an amazing confluence of all parts of India. You are obviously on your father's side of Bengali heritage. You married a Malayali, my uncle. You have gone ahead and got yourself 2 Punjabi daughters-in-law. I gather your sisters are married to Christian families. There are Muslim cousins somewhere up the family tree. You
Yes,
represent the entire
my
diversity
aunt
of our
Tara,
country.
my mother's sister, married Rashid Ali Beg, who was the ambassador in Iran, and we had wonderful journeys with my aunt and uncle through the whole of the Middle East. We went from Beirut through Jordan, through Syria, and then we stayed in Baghdad, and then back to Iran. And we stayed very grandly. At that time, I was busy hitchhiking throughout Europe. And I had got to Beirut with my friend Shama Zaidi on a bum boat, very uncomfortable. We had got to Piraeus in Greece. Shama and I then spent a month. We found that Athens was too expensive for us. And we spent a whole month in Sparta, in a little village, helping around the farm for our keep. Of course, there was an occasion where we decided to climb a mountain in Greece.
Good for you.
And we got to the top of the mountain, and there was a convent, and the nuns were extremely hospitable. They gave us a meal, and they kept on pressing ouzo, which they had made themselves, upon us. So by the time we left, I was completely sozzled, and I lay down in the grass on the way down and went to sleep, and we didn't wake up till the next morning.
I'm not surprised. What a wonderful story. I think we need to take a break there. I'll be back right after the break with Anjolie Ela Menon. Welcome back, and we are at To The Point with Anjolie Ela Menon. Anjolie, one thing, we've been talking about your life, and it's fun, we could go on for a long time, but I think listeners will be very curious to know more about your art. We've had a couple of pieces in the background. I would say, as a fan, but not an expert on art, that your work is instantly recognizable. There are some recurring motifs and themes that seem to go back right to your earliest work in the 50s. There's a certain kind of female face. I'm privileged to have one on my living room wall, and I've seen it in many other places. There are the crows. There are goats. There's an empty chair very often. And there are windows. And all of these things, I suspect, have meanings to you that may not necessarily be apparent from the context of the painting itself. Yeah. Let me start with, if I may, the crows. Why the crows? Why are there so many crows in Anjolie Ela Menon's
while
painting?
we lived in Bombay, I used to paint on a little balcony of the house. I mean, for many years, I painted in a little corner of the house, not having a studio. I've been lucky now that I've had a studio for the last 25 years in Nizamuddin Basti.
Yeah.
But there was this particular crow who was so urban and so friendly. He would be there every day, and I'd keep a morsel for him, and he'd pick it. And I know it was the same friendly crow. And he insinuated himself into the painting. And he's remained there ever since. But he recurs more and more if I'm in Bombay, because that is the only creature that you see in that huge urban complex.
So true. I've grown up in Bombay, and I mean, I certainly do remember very many crows there than I've ever seen in Delhi or Calcutta. Okay, the empty chair. Now, I understand, at least I've read that perhaps that was an allusion to your pain at the loss of your mother, or was it your father? Your father. Tell us about that.
I'll say something. If you look through the entire body of my work, I've determinedly been a figurative painter.
Yes.
Even at the time where everyone was going abstract. And I was considered, I've been named by many critics as a maverick because I was always going in the opposite direction of where everyone else was going. So I have to say that because I was a figurative painter, even when there's no figure there, there is the figure that has just been, that has just left the canvas. And the empty chair certainly is a symbol of those who have gone. There's usually some little bit left behind on the chair, maybe a piece of knitting, a book, next to the chair, a cup of tea.
And does each of those items correspond to someone you're specifically thinking of? Does your father have a book, or your mother?
Quite often.
Yeah?
Quite often.
A different object each time.
And the chair itself is a very eloquent piece of inspiration. I've had someone come to an exhibition, 2 people came to an exhibition and in Bombay, and they were fighting over the fact that the chair was their grandmother's chair. There's something universal
about chairs,
about the chair, and particularly about the empty chair.
Right.
Yes.
So true. But tell me, you've had, as far as I know, rather urban life. Why the goats? Where do you get goats in your city?
Nizamuddin Basti, it's full of goats.
Oh, really?
And if I leave the door open on a hot day, they come and eat up all the drawings. They love eating paper. So the thing about my life in the Basti is that I'm very jura hua, as they say, with the people of the Basti.
Okay.
And I suppose I ought to define what the Lal Dora or the Basti is. It's the village within the new urban city. But it has its own rules, it has its own people, and they live the life of a village right there in the heart of Delhi.
So there's village life in the urban space.
Yes.
And that's what the goats evoke for you?
That's what the goats are there. Unfortunately, during Eid, they let the goats into the park in front and they eat up every last leaf. But there's something about a goat that is again very significant in its shape, in its boniness, the fact that it's avaricious. I like that.
Yes. Now, in Mrs. Sonia Gandhi's office, in fact, directly across from where she likes to sit, there is an Anjolie Ela Menon window. Now, you have windows in a lot of your paintings.
Yes.
What's that about?
I'll tell you. The first time that I ever did a so-called window painting was when there was an exhibition being I was in Bombay, and there's an exhibition being held in Delhi by O.P. Jain. And he said, you must send me a painting. Suddenly, one fine morning when I didn't have the car that day, someone arrived to pick up the painting, and it hadn't been framed. And I knew that the exhibition was going to start in 2 days, so there wouldn't have been time for O.P. Jain to frame it either. So I went down into the garage. Actually, I went to look for the car, and it wasn't there. And there was this old window lying. And it happened that the painting was exactly the same size as the window. So I knocked off 2 of the panes, stuck the painting behind the window and nailed it up and sent it off. And I apologized to O.P. Jain, and there was a certain price on the painting. I apologized to him for sending it in a window instead of in a frame. Apparently sold the first day of the exhibition at about 5 times the price that I had quoted.
So it turned out that this
this is what I call the happy accident. There are many happy accidents.
But thereafter you actually acquired windows and
then
painted them.
At the same time we were building a house in Bangalore on a shoestring.
Okay.
So I went to the Lakkad Bazaar in Bombay, and amazing windows from all these old Parsi houses that were being demolished. They were the most extraordinary shaped windows, and they also, most of them had a wonderful patina on them, where layers and years of paint had been scrubbed and repainted. So I left the patina on the windows, and for 10 years thereafter, the window paintings were so ubiquitous.
They were.
And everyone wanted them.
But you stopped doing them?
No, occasionally when I come across a window, I do it. I did one year before last. I got a wonderful window from Ahmedabad, from the Lakkad Bazaar there. It was a Naukhana with carving and everything. And I did a big painting for an exhibition in Bombay.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
Tell me, there's one thing we haven't talked about is the Kerala connection. You have a lovely series called the Kollungod series, and of course that means a lot to me. It's my mother's village or town of birth and upbringing, and at the same time it's where you married into.
Yes.
And when I look back on some of that work, the other thing distinctive about it is it's essentially portraiture. Lots and lots of people you've met there or perhaps imagined there.
No, I have to tell you about that. Some of my husband's relatives belonged to the palace there. An aunt was married to one of the younger Rajas. And in her, in a trunk in her house, she lived in Coimbatore, but she used to go frequently back to Kollungod to stay with her husband, who determinedly lived in Kollungod. He wouldn't live in Coimbatore. And there's an album full of sepia photographs. Which she said, well, you can have it if it's useful for you. And there were daguerreotype negatives on glass.
Wow.
And she let me have access to those as well. So there was a whole series that came out of Kerala. And then the series, till then, my early work had been very influenced by Christian iconography and early Christian art. Byzantine paintings, and I was quite often spoken of as being so Western in my inspiration. It was only after I got married that the whole Indian imagery kicked in, and I was once really compared to Amrita Shergill, who had a bit the same trajectory. She was also at the Beaux-Arts. Early work, some of the early work was quite traditional. Traditional European painting had influenced us. And then when she came back to India, she went to the south, and there she did that enormous series of the bride's toilet and the Namudris. And similarly, it's when I went to Kerala and quite often stayed with my husband's aunt, Indira Tamban, that I had access to all this amazing material.
Honestly, there's so much more we could talk about, but it seems our time is up. I do want to thank you for coming to Sansad TV and joining me in this conversation. There's lots of areas of your life and work that remain to be explored, but the best thing I can recommend to people is look at Anjolie Ela Menon's art.
What about the secrets?
And the secrets, we'll come back on another occasion, maybe in private. Thank you so very much.
Not at all.
And to all the viewers, thank you for joining To The Point. I'm Shashi Tharoor. Jai Hind.